All right, welcome to another evolution in the Cascade Rifle YouTube channel. My name is Colonel Craig Broyles, and the purpose of this YouTube channel is to educate officers within the brigade, educate military professionals throughout the U.S. military and abroad, and for you, if anyone that's interested in learning more about the art of war. Now, before I begin, I want to make it clear that all the assertions I'm making are entirely my own. They do not reflect the policies, regulations, doctrines, and viewpoints of the Washington Army National Guard, U.S. military, and the Department of Defense. Now, this video is an introduction, and the videos that following it is all based on the idea of answering the question, how do you fight outnumbered and win? The reason why is because that is the challenge that almost every military has faced throughout the history of warfare. When you think about the famous battles, Gideon and the Midianites from the Old Testament, the Athenians before they faced the Persians for the Battle of Marathon, Hannibal at Cannae, Nelson at Trafalgar, Sam Houston at San Jacinto, and on and on. Those battles are famous because the winners were the underdogs. And so the military's facing that situation, knowing that the war is coming, the battle's coming, and they're going to be significantly undermatched or outnumbered. They try to study those battles and understand how can they still win, even though they are outnumbered and undermanned. Now, not only is this a problem that militaries face, it's a problem that each one of us face. It applies to each one of us in our daily lives. How do you fight outnumbered and win? For example, which one of you watching, maybe you tried out for a sports team, a football, basketball, whatever, and you're trying for that key position, and there's many going out for that position. How do you win there? Maybe you've tried out for a key role in a play. There's numerous those trying out. Maybe there's one main role. The first chair in the orchestra. Or maybe you've applied for a job, a highly prestigious job, hundreds, maybe even thousands of applicants for just a few spots. So that also applies, the same philosophy as how the militaries have fought outnumbered and win, also applies very similarly to how you can fight outnumbered and win in your sphere. This is important really because where we face in the 21st century, the U.S. military, though growing up, the global war on terror, where I used to an abundance of resources going against opponents who typically had scarcity, we're now facing opponents who outnumber us in many ways. And we have to relearn the lessons that our predecessors really struggled with, was fighting outnumbered and win. In the early doctrinal manuals of the 1980s called Air Land Battle, that was the bumper sticker, fight outnumbered and win. And for whatever reason, that has always resonated me and proved me fascinated of how they went about it. And it's interesting that we face that same challenge today. The other reason we're focusing on fighting outnumbered and win is because, frankly, it's really hard. When you have many soldiers and you completely outnumber your opponent, when you have an abundance of ammunition, abundance of firepower, it doesn't take a whole lot of mental strain to figure out how to beat your adversary. You just bludgeon with a lot of punches. And so it doesn't take a lot of cleverness when you outnumber your opponent. But be on the other side, you rely entirely on all the mental tools and all the deception and all the cleverness and everything that's going to take innovation, all that, being able to win. And to build those mental abilities is what we're going after, because that's what we're likely going to face as we go forward. Now, a couple things I want to highlight is this idea of asymmetry. I bring that up because, growing up through the global war on terror, we'd hear about asymmetric threats. Maybe that, they had the regular military, we have tanks and airplanes and soldiers and all that. We're facing someone who's not that, and that was asymmetric. And I don't agree with that kind of construct because it kind of makes it think that when you're going up against another opponent, another military, that it is symmetrical, which is entirely false. Symmetry almost never, ever happens. One side will always have an advantage in some way. Either it'll have more of something, greater technology or something. There's always going to be these mismatches. And we're going to really get into how do you identify and how to move those mismatches to take advantage of it. But understand that when you talk about fighting outnumbered and win, that's always a thing. because one side will always have an asymmetrical advantage or disadvantage over the other. Lastly, as I mentioned, is this idea of scarcity and prioritization. I was growing up, again, as I mentioned, pretty used to having abundance of firepower, abundance of resources, and that's no longer the case. Recently, a lot of my officers have been talking to me about how they're supposed to thrive, how they're supposed to get after a lot of the training and get after a lot of what they're asked to do when resources have become quite scarce. My answer is actually, though that's hard, but it's actually beneficial, because when you do not have a lot of time, when you don't have a lot of money, you tend to do the most important things. And you then become and start developing a lot of the skills that are required for us to win in the 21st century. We talk about in the 24th century, military officers and leaders need to have agility, have to be innovative, have to take initiative, have to be creative. Well, frankly, when you have a lot, those skills are not needed. For example, think about, if you have a lot of money in your bank account, you don't have to be quite innovative and creative figuring out what you want to eat. It's driven by your appetite or just basically convenience. But when you only have a couple bucks in your pocket, you go into your cupboard and you see macaroni and cheese, tuna fish, tomato sauce. That's when you get quite creative and quite innovative. And then you start figure out what to do, make a lot with a little. And those skills just don't come about. They just have to be practiced. And then with prioritization, when you don't have a lot, you have to do the most important thing. And we've become accustomed to having lots of priorities. But when you don't have a lot, you have to truly do what is the most important thing. And so that's, again, when you do that, it helps you fight outnumbered and win. Okay, so that's the introduction video. The next video is we're going to introduce the foundation of these ideas, which is JFC Fuller's mental, moral, and physical. That's kind of like the blocking and tackling before we can continue on in this idea. So stay tuned for that one. And thanks for watching Cascade Rifles.